What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Talking to the Benfica podcast, episode number 231. My name is Alfredo. I'm here with Steve Santos. What's going on, Steve?
What's up, Alfredo? It's a night after Valentine's Day. We all got a nice gift. Uh, it's a good day. It's a good
Hey,
day.
you know who else got a nice gift? Benfica.
That's who I was getting at. When I said we, that's who I
Oh,
was.
I thought
That's
that you were talking about the flowers your wife bought you.
yeah, flowers. Let's be nice.
Anyway, we're waiting on Chris. On tonight's podcast, the Roca recap, which the Roca game took place this past Friday. And then we'll also have a recap of last night's game against Borussia Dortmund for the Champions League round of 16th. And we'll look ahead to Braga, which comes up this Sunday, where Benfica will travel up north to the Pereira to play Braga. So let's get right into this, Steve. Benfica play the Roca on Friday in anticipation of the game on Tuesday versus Dortmund. I'll give you the lineup. Ederson, Semedo, Luizão, Lindelof, and Eliseu. Lindelof and Pizzi were in the middle.
Face and Pizzi. Sorry, man.
I don't know where I put
said Lindelof again.
I rushed through these notes. Sorry about that. Fesa and Pizzi, Carrilho, Zivkovic on the wings. Jonas behind Mitroglou was the lineup. Surprised to see Carrillo, but after the performance that he had and something that I had mentioned here on the podcast, that I had seen a little bit of a little bit more intensity on his game, a little bit more determination. I'm not surprised at all that he was given another chance, and he did take advantage of this chance. He was actually named the player of the match, and there's already been talked about that he is the signing for the second half of the season.
A bit premature. I mean, he had a very good game against Roca. He's looked a little bit more lively, but I'd like to see a string of games where he makes a difference to be calling him the signing of the second half of the season. Like we said, from the moment there was news of us signing him, there's obviously a talented player there. There is potential for a player that can make a huge difference in our league, but he's yet to show that on a consistent basis. Even at Sporting, I mean, he had a good half a season with Jesus, and then lost it with the contract talks or whatever it was, and then out he went. He's never had a very consistent showing since he came to Portugal, as far as I know. So it's a bit early to be that optimistic about him, but match against Roca, let's give him credit for at least that one match. He's got this very I think his nickname is the Snake in Spanish. Don't ask me how you say it.
La Culebra.
There you go. But you could see that he's got that like very deceiving, very smooth movement. That first touch to get past the guy, the drop of the shoulder, he's really good at that. You got to give him credit for that. The ability's there. We just got to hold off on some not criticism, but positive vibes and accolades, praise. There's the word I was looking for. It's soon. It's really soon to be calling him that kind of stuff.
Yeah, he's got his movement is quite deceiving because it's
a long legs.
It starts off slow almost, but there's an explosive to the move, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a slow body move or leg move, but there's a certain explosion off that move, and I think that's what when we look at a little snake almost, it's that little smooth slithering move, and then just the attack almost, and I guess that's why they call him the Culebra, I guess, or the snake. But I was happy that that he played well, because we do need him to play well, regardless of how many wingers we got on this team. But hey, whoever's playing good, gets the start. Zivkovic, at this point, I mean, he's just been a beast. So not much to say about the game. Benfica won 3-0 goals for Mitroglou in the 25th minute and the 35th minute. Also, Ederson picked up a red in the 41st minute in what some people may call, uh,
It's questionable.
questionable. Yes, it is a
Questionable.
foul. It depends on the angle. From what I read, the reports that I read, the call was made by the assistant referee or one of the assistant referees, and I got to be honest. It's a tough call. If you want to say that he's the last man, I don't think he's the last man, but he is the guy that makes the contact with the forward first. I think there was two defenders or one defender with the attacker, and Ederson does make the first contact. So I don't know if the basis of the call is based on the last man and denying a goal scoring opportunity, but he did get a red. It didn't look like a foul for a red, even by an outfield player. If it's made by an outfield player, it didn't look like a foul for a red, but he did pick up the red. Julie Cesar comes in from Mitroglou, who had scored 2 goals, and then Benfica just pretty much cruised
Yeah.
for the rest of the game. So we had been talking here, Steve, about the importance of Benfica playing these games at home, the majority of the February games at home after that little shaky or rocky period that Benfica just had with the loss against Stubble and with the tie against Boavista. But needless to say, 4 games at home, including the Dortmund game, 4 clean sheets, Steve.
It's you can't argue with that. Um, the whole thing about playing at home, I also it it helps the players be at home with the crowd behind them, be in familiar surroundings. Um, it's just that you could play away from home and you're struggling, and you even when we play away from home in Portugal, I know it's a little bit different because we always have a lot of fans, but it's different. You're traveling further away, you're less comfortable, and having that comfort zone is showing. You're what, 3 games in a row clean sheets, or is that two, three, two?
Uh, four,
Aroca
or 4 clean sheets.
since the
I'm
last.
sorry, three games. I'm sorry, 3 games, 3 clean sheets.
There
Three
you go.
games at home, 3 clean sheets. So, I mean, that's good, and that's the stability that we're looking for. I know that perhaps this Dortmund is a little bit of fortuitous. Some might say it's fortuitous. Some might say it's part of the work, but we'll get to that. But needless to say, um, a very good game by Benfica to get back that confidence that they needed after that little rocky period, as I mentioned. So 3-0 by Benfica. Benfica soldiers on first place, playing first, putting the pressure on Porto, who ended up winning their game anyway. But nonetheless, I think that playing first is always a good thing. What do you think, Steve? You think there's an advantage to playing first or playing last?
Um, it depends. If you're confident, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. Um, Especially when you're the better team 90% of the time. For me, I don't think it really matters. It's when there's that shadow of the doubt where it looked like Benfica might have had it a couple of weeks ago that it's a little bit more worrisome, and that's when Spirit Sant even made that comment. They're not used to playing but from behind, yada yada. That's when maybe it can play games with your mind. But for me, I don't think it makes that much of a difference when you're confident, you're on form. You could play last, you could play first. It doesn't matter because you go out there and you know what the job you have to do. So it doesn't matter. Um, what I going for a completely different topic on this game. Something that I'm happy about is that neither Samidu or Pizzi picked up their yellows that would
Yeah.
have ruled them out for the Braga game this weekend.
Yeah.
Because Rui Vitória is very famous for always saying the most important game is always the next one, and I personally would have saved at least Samidu at this point because we have a viable or a worthy substitute as putting Almeida on the right and Eliseu on the left. It was good enough to win the championship last year. I would have done it just to save Samidu a yellow that would take him away from a very important match, and to give the guy a rest who's played, I think, every game we've played so far this season. So or if it's not every game, it's nearly every game.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with you, Steve. I thought that Vitoria would rest some guys, especially out of the Dortmund clash, that he would rest some guys against the Roca, who I think was penultimate in the table, if I'm not mistaken, not having to look back, but they were down there, and I'm surprised that some of the substitutions that he made weren't really to save guys. I mean, he took out, well, he saved Jonas, but Jonas couldn't play in the Champions League anyway. Well, he ended up not being able to play because of the injury, but he took out Jonas in the 67th minute, and then he took out Pizzi in the 80th minute. That's not necessarily giving some Pizzi a rest in the 80th
No,
minute.
no, the 80th minute was okay. You're not getting a card. Get the hell out of here, which was what I take that as. But the Samidu one was an easy switch that I would have been much happier had he made it. But at this point, it worked out in his favor. It's just another 90 minutes under Samidu's legs. But I'm keeping an eye on him. I feel like he's really playing within himself, trying to save those bursts of energy that were so prevalent in the beginning of the season, and not use them as often now when he doesn't need to. But he definitely had some sprints yesterday. So
Yeah, absolutely.
in the wrong direction, though, sadly.
So let's turn our attention now to the Dortmund game, round of 16th of the UEFA Champions League that happened yesterday at Stadio de Luz. And I'll give you the lineup: Ederson, Semedo, Luizão, Lindelof, and Eliseu. Feza and Pizzi in the middle. Salvio and Carrillo on the left. And Mitroglou and Rafa were up front. Now, Zivkovic, who had picked up apparently some kind of a suspension when he was playing with his team. What was Partizan?
Yeah.
His team with Partizan in the Champions League last year had to serve a game. So this was the game that he saved. Then we also found out earlier, not early in the day, but the day before, that Jonas had picked up some kind of injury, and then he was going to be a game time decision. Then we found out early in the game that Jonas was not going to be able to go. I believe that Rui Vitória on his presser did announce that Jonas was in a convocados list, but he was doubtful he was going to play. So as it turns out, some kind of neck injury to Jonas really prevented him to playing against Dortmund. So it was Rafa and Mitroglou up front, and then Carrillo, who had had a hot game against Roca, as we mentioned, was given the start on one of the wings, and Salvio, who hadn't played against Roca, was back in the lineup. So not much of a questionable lineup, if you will, or something you want to scratch your head. I think those guys were all guys that we thought, okay, well, if Jonas is hurt, Rafa would be the obvious substitutes, being that Guedes is not around, and then on the wing, give the start to Carrillo, being that he's hot. Not much there.
No, I the only thing I have a question is what happened to Servi. I know I mentioned this on our little WhatsApp group going on there, but somebody mentioned it somewhere that the moment that his agent was talking about moves to Germany, that he kind of got pushed aside, and both you and I kind of have a hard time believing that Rui Vitória did that, but I don't know, it was really abrupt.
Yeah,
that he's just stopped getting minutes. I mean, he's getting very limited playing time. He played a little bit yesterday, but since then.
So the story was that that his agent came out on one of the dailies and it mentioned that and like a lot of agents mention, and even the players have fallen into this trap of mentioning that Benfica or a club in Portugal just serves as a trampoline into a bigger club, into a bigger league. And I think that his agent said something to that effect. Now, these weren't Servi's words, these were his agent's words. So I'm not sure if for some reason this had an effect on how the player was training. mental effect, because I've heard Rui Vitória say before that if you're not totally focused on the team, there's a good chance that you'd be left out. I mean, they did say this when Lindelof's and forth between Benfica and Man United. All the rumors were circling around. And I think he did sit Lindelof for 1 or 2 games, albeit the League Cup games. But I think that Rui Vitória doesn't really tolerate any sort of distractions. I don't know if he was distracted at this point. It's just us um,
Speculating.
speculating, because we're kind of like putting two and two together, and it comes at a time where his agent spoke, and right after that, Servi fell off the lineup, which he was always a guy first off the bench, or
Or
if
started.
if somebody was hurt, he would start. And in this case, he would have probably started against Roca instead of Carrillo, and Carrillo got the start, and obviously Carrillo with the hot game against Roca now gets the start against Dortmund. As far as Jonas's injury, I'm not sure. There was mention. I think it was mentioned on the paper what kind of injury it is. For me, he probably just fell asleep on the couch without a pillow, and he messed up his neck. That's what I think. That's my theory. But then again, we'll see, and we'll see if he's going to be good to go against Braga this weekend.
I really hope so.
Yeah, so let's talk about a little bit about this game, Steve. Dortmund. Obviously, we had spoken about Dortmund the week before on the podcast in a preview of the game. And look, we know that Dortmund likes to keep the ball, presses high, plays the ball pretty fast between sectors and between the guys up front in the final third, and that Benfica was going to have some issues. Now, I got to be honest with you. That's first 15 minutes of the game, back and forth. Not something that both coaches wanted to see.
No, absolutely not. It could have got a lot worse though. For on our end, had Aubameyang scored that goal, it could have been a lot more one-way traffic, even more so than it was during the rest of the game. But the back and forth, the helter-skelter stuff it's always it's an emotional thing. I mean, the players know what their duties are and what the tactics were set up for the match, but sometimes you get a little carried away. You make an errant pass. You think you could do something that you really shouldn't be doing in those type of situations. You lose the ball. That's kind of the thing that happens. You know, when commentators always say, "Oh, they need to find their feet in the first 15 minutes." If the game opens up in certain ways, and it's not about finding your feet, but it's like, "Oh my God, there's a chance here. We gotta really go for it." That's the kind of things that end up happening. You end up getting, instead of a game that's kind of cautious and trying to figure each other out, you get a game that's just like back and forth, and that's what I think I saw in the first 15 minutes. But after that, we
Yeah.
really struggled, to be
Yeah. Well,
just frank.
yeah. Let me tell you how I read, and this kind of ties in with what you're saying about the first 15 minutes. Trying to, if there's a chance, you take it. But I think that, and it took exactly Dortmund perhaps 15 to 20 minutes to really organize the way they were pressing and what points they should pressure. And I think that once they figured this out, then they put the pressure on Benfica, and Benfica really struggled to get out of their own half, to connect passes together, to uh, go through the different phases of transition with the Dortmund press. I remember Pizzi got caught in possession a couple times. Fesa oftentimes was outmanned in the midfield, and there was a lot of guys just not being able to get that ball from that first phase of construction out to an outlet to a guy that could do it. In the first 15 minutes, while Dortmund was adjusting their pressure, um, their pressure tactics, and where should they pressure and where they should position themselves, Benfica had a couple openings, and somebody was asking me or asking us what the tactics should be for the second game. And if there's anything that Benfica learned from this game, is that that first phase of construction, and the ball going through the sectors, we got to be a lot quicker with the combinations to get out of the pressure set up by Dortmund.
Yeah, I have to agree with that, but that's something. If there's a gripe that I've always had with Rui Vitória is we do not we do not build out of the back efficiently. How's that? If you watch us, even in Portugal, you'll see a lot of guys behind the first line of pressure against the small teams, even in Portugal. So you'll see even Pizzi or Fesa alongside the fullbacks or just ahead of the fullbacks, but still with the opposing forwards in front of them. And that's you're playing four guys against two when you really should be playing three against two, or even man to man, two against two if you're brave and you have that first guy like Fesa playing behind the first wave of pressure, and that allows you to come out a little bit easier because you have an easier outlet. But when you play with the four guys against the two, you limit yourself into where you can play the ball into in the next phase, in the next line of players, because you take Pizzi out, you take Fesa out of that line, and there's only the outside wingers coming in because normally the fullbacks will be a little bit further and wider and harder to get, but
Yeah,
you'll have your Salvio and your Servis or whatnot kind of trying to make that passing lane inside, and you'll have your Jonas. But if you can't find those guys, you're out of luck. And
you're
that's
hoofing it.
you're exactly. And we didn't do enough hoofing it, I think, against Dortmund. Um,
Yeah,
and we caught it. We got ourselves into a lot of trouble because of it. But that's not something that's going to happen overnight. And
no,
I do not expect us to start building up from the back with three or trying different variations to get Pizzi more in between lines than instead of facing all 11 players. Um, it happens sometimes in Portugal, but it's not often enough that I think it's
yeah,
going to happen against Dortmund. So what we really have to do is really concentrate on the way we position ourselves, limiting Dortmund and what they want to do and what
yeah,
they can do, instead of trying to play it out of the back. I mean, the opportunities are there that if we can get past that first phase of pressure, that they will open up, because like you mentioned, they press with we were talking about this before the air, sorry, but they press with a line of like 5-6 guys across the middle of the park, that if you can get there, you're looking at 3 or 4 guys tops. And if you have a Rafa who is very dangerous on the 1v1s, has that pace, that that could cause a lot of problems for Dortmund. But it's very difficult to get that outlet ball. And when you don't have a Jonas in the team, that doesn't help as well.
yeah.
Because Jonas allows you, even if the ball's not the greatest, Jonas has his tricks to hold on to the ball, to win a foul, to bring other players into him. It's different, and we really missed that yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if Benfica is to have any success against this Dortmund and Germany, and look, it's going to be difficult, but not impossible. We're gonna have to find a way to find that outlet ball for both Pizzi and Fesa when we build up out of the back. I don't know what they're going to do. It's something that they come at you very quick. You don't really have time to react. You don't have time to lift up your head. You got to know where exactly the outball is going to be. And as Steve mentioned, it's not something that happens over time. It's something that needs to be worked out in the training pitch. Routines need to be set up. Guys need to know exactly where they need to be to get the ball. And that's the only way we're going to be able to beat Dortmund, because in reality, we were fortunate that Aubameyang didn't score those goals, and the chances that they have, Ederson came up big in the penalty especially. But if Dortmund is on, I mean, they could have been easily 3-4, 4-1 for Dortmund easily, because Benfica played what Dortmund allowed Benfica to play. And Benfica, any opponent that Benfica faces in the in the Liga NOS, including the Porto and Sporting, is not going to bring this type of pressure, this type of swarming of the ball. So Benfica is not really used to this. So it's going to be a hard time in Dortmund. But I think that if Benfica could figure out how to break their that line of pressure in the midfield and get behind those 4 or 5 guys in the midfield and attack the 3 center backs, and Jordan is going to be a huge part of this. I think that Benfica could be successful in Dortmund.
I agree. I mean, if you can make the first ball that you win after Dortmund's attacking, if you can make that first ball a vertical one between the sectors, you're gonna have success against Dortmund. It's just very difficult.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is to really break down that counter press. And when we talk about counter press, we talk about after they lose the ball on the attack, the immediate pressure after that is called a counter press, right? Am I correct, Steve, when I say that?
No, you're incorrect.
Oh, sorry.
The
Well,
counter press. The counter press is okay. Well, no, I guess you're kind of right. The press, like the original pressing, is when one team has already controlled the ball and is trying to come out. That's
right.
pressing. Counter pressing is the
As soon as you lose the ball.
moment Dortmund loses the ball, you're on top of them again. Yes, so
That's
yeah,
right. So
they do both quite well.
yeah, so when Dortmund attacks, it gets into the final third with the ball, and Benfica defends, and Dortmund loses the ball. That pressure that Dortmund applies right away in our first third is called a counter press. So they do that very well. So if we get a chance, or if we're able to break up that counter press and get the ball to a player in between lines behind that bank of 4 or 5 guys in the midfield, that's where we're going to find success in Dortmund. Otherwise, it's going to be tough. Steve, but before we go, let's just talk a little bit. What do you think Benfica's approach is going to be like in Dortmund? And I know that the game is still a couple of weeks away, if I'm not mistaken. I think March 5th, Benfica plays. But, since the game is fresh in our minds, what do you think? Do you think that once again Benfica is going to give the possession to Dortmund like they gave, and they're going to be ready to counter? You think that's the approach that Benfica is going to take to Germany?
Absolutely. If you guys remember the matches versus Bayern Munich last year, where we really made it very difficult for them to play through, that's what we're going to have to do again. Very tight, compact lines, always moving as a unit, allowing Dortmund to play the ball to the flanks and work from there, but never allowing them, or trying your best not to allow them to build from the back and come through the middle. If you watch yesterday's game, there's a halftime substitution that really shows you that Lui500 was watching the match, and he knew that he had to make a change to make it more difficult for Dortmund to play the ball through us into the middle. Carrillo in a match like yesterday,
yeah,
if you can't get him the ball, if you can't get him in 1v1 situations, he's not very useful for you.
Yep.
Which is actually one of the things that surprised me that Servi didn't play, is for exactly that reason. Servi has shown to really acclimatize to the European way of playing, and defending his fullback and making extra numbers in midfield when need be. I was surprised that Servi didn't get the nod over Carrillo in that sense. But credit to Lui500, he saw what he needed to do was close up the middle of the pitch, not allow the center backs to come out as easily as they were in the first half, and play the ball into the Reus and Dembele's and whatnot. And we looked a little bit more comfortable, to say the least, in the second half because of Felipe Augusto. Yeah. I would not be surprised if we play a very similar lineup. The only thing is, when you play that way, you find it difficult to place Jonas. So we'll have to see if Jonas is not fit for the Dortmund match. I am pretty sure we'll see that same midfield three that we saw start the second half.
Yeah, Absolutely. So it'll be a tough game, but I think that Benfica, with the one goal in favor, uh, does have their destiny in their hands. It's not going to be easy, but for sure, Benfica takes a one goal lead into Dortmund. So they are in the driver's seat, if you will. Even though that when you watch that game, you will see that Dortmund will have most of the possession and most of the initiative. Let's hope that Aubameyang will be on his off day, just like he was in Lisbon. In regards to the penalty, somebody had posted a graphic of the last four penalties that Aubameyang had hit, and Ederson apparently did his homework and didn't move. And Steve, that's something you don't see a lot. A goalie just stay
Waiting.
in the middle.
No,
And most of the
that's
time, I'm watching the penalties. Why doesn't the goalie just sit in the middle and wait for these balls?
uh, it's techniques. I guess we. I'm no goalkeeper coach, but I'm guessing that the percentages don't work in your favor because not enough guys shoot it down the middle, and if any of them actually go for a corner, if you wait for it, you're never going to catch it. So it the what keepers do is it's all your penalty saving style. There's guys who really wait late to guess because they know that the player that's taking the shot is one of those guys that really waits late to decide which way they're going to put it based on which way the goalie moves. So there's penalties are an art form on both sides, both the taker and the goalkeeper. I don't know if I like the idea of standing still. Personally, I know
Yeah,
you. I
that's a
know you.
tough one.
I know you. Like you always watch and you're like, yeah, but if you stood still, you would stop it. But
Yeah.
you have to try to read the body and try to do your homework and know which way this guy normally takes his penalty shots. It's a very much a percentage game and a very much a mind game. It's really there's no right way to go about it. The right way is to cheat as much as you can, come off that line as much as you can, and try to break up the angles a little bit more. But that's the only way.
Yeah. The biggest thing for me is the fact that if you sit still and you don't dive to one side and the ball goes to one of the corners, then you're almost accused of, oh, you didn't
Not
even try.
trying. Yeah.
And then there's the fact that there's a lot of guys that when they're going through a dip in confidence, that the sure thing is down the middle because most of the keepers will pick one side and go to it. And like I said, I don't see many keepers just sitting in the middle. But again, Ederson had done his homework, and sure enough, that ball came right at him. So I mean, good for Ederson. He also had a fabulous game. He looks at this game as probably one that he won't soon forget. But good for Benfica, good for Ederson, and good for the fans who knew that this was going to be a hard game. But anybody that before the game was presented with a paper and we're going to win 1-0, I'm sure that there's a lot of people that would sign on. Perhaps most people would sign on to that.
Yeah. I would. I What was most important was getting a clean sheet, and we did that. So now
Yeah.
we are alive in the second leg. If we score in Germany, we our chances are really good, if you ask me.
Yeah.
So if we're as efficient as we were yesterday in Germany, our chances of going through are very good.
So Luizão completes his 500th game for Benfica. That's quite a milestone that you don't see much these days. That there's so much money circulating in the game of in the world of football. It's very rare to see a player with that type of tenure that Luizão has had for Benfica. 500 games is quite a milestone. And without even going back to the stat sheet and looking at players that have reached that milestone, I bet you that perhaps in the last 15, 20 years, there's not many players that have hit, if any at all, that have hit that milestone, Steve.
No, not in Portugal. I mean, there's some big one club guys and some bigger clubs with more money that they can hold on to them.
Right.
But in Portugal, I can't think of anybody within the past decade or so that would have that many games for their club.
Yeah. Isso aí, garoto. I've been
I think
practicing. I was waiting for Cristiano for his Louis500 impression, but he's not here. And I've been practicing, but it hasn't come out all that great.
it wasn't too bad. Better than I could ever do, that's for sure.
Anyway, now we turn our attention to Braga, which comes up this Sunday, 8:15 local. Benfica will travel to the Quarry or to the Pedreira. Braga is currently fourth place, 38 points out of 11 wins, 5 ties, and 5 losses at home. Braga, 8 wins, 2 ties, 1 loss. So they've only lost 1 game at home. They have the third best attack at home and the fourth best defense at home. As I mentioned, they are fourth place. In the last 6 games that Braga has played, they have only won 1 game. So they're going through a little bit of a tough time, especially after sacking what's his name? What's this guy's name?
Peseiro.
Peseiro. I was gonna call you Pedreiro.
You had me going too. I was like, what the hell is that guy's name?
Yeah, I was gonna call him Pedreiro, like the Pedreira. But yeah, after sacking Peseiro, they haven't really had much of a good time with Jorge Simão, right? Jorge Simão is the guy that took over.
That's the guy. For me, an overly defensive coach. I don't. Not a big fan at a club like Braga. You're gonna have to be a little bit more expansive if you want to be the third best team in Portugal or really be the fourth best team.
Yeah.
So
yeah, last 10 at the head, 8 wins for Benfica, 2 losses. Last 5 at the Quarry, 3 wins, 2 losses if you want to count the penalty win for the Portuguese Cup a few years back. But let's talk about going into this game, Steve. Benfica comes off a very emotional, physically taxing game against Dortmund. Now they travel up north to play against a Braga who has been trying to find their feet, who haven't won a game in the past 5 games. I want to say they've only won 1 game in the and out of the last 6 games. I think the last 3 games they have yet to win a game. So Braga is trying to find his way and trying not to really miss out on those Europe spots. And Benfica comes off, as I mentioned, the victory going into the Quarry. I know it's hard to define this game as a trap game because Braga has always been good competition for Benfica, but it has a little bit of a different feel, this game, Steve.
Oh, definitely. This is the type of game where your man management skills, your psychological skills that Rui Vitória we feel are the strongest parts of his the strongest tools he has. This is where he's going to have to show him. You have a very high profile match against a very good team where you fought tooth and nail to get your 3 points or to get your lead in the tie, to a game where yes, Braga is one of the more competitive teams in the league. Yes, they do give us trouble from time to time, but the difference in class is huge. I mean, the difference in class from Dortmund to Benfica, if you ask me, is quite outstanding. So to go from Dortmund to Braga and try to keep your game at the same level, tired after all that you mentioned, it's tough. And I think it's as big as a trap game as you're ever going to see, just because of that, not because of the supposed quality that Braga brings to the table. It's just the way the game's mapped out. You have that doubt in your mind because you know what the players went through to get what they did versus Dortmund.
Yeah.
Will they be able to keep the level that high, or at least at a level that will get them the points that you need? The 3 points is the only thing that we could really. I mean, in Portugal, Benfica's got to play every game expecting to get 3 points, and that's what we have to do in Braga.
Well, if it's any consolation, at least Jonas should be ready to go, and he's fresh. So is Zivkovic. He's fresh also. So hopefully we'll get those two guys back. No Ederson after picking up the red card against the Roca. So Julius Caesar will be in goal, and not much of a difference there. So I don't think we could really be lamenting the absence of Ederson in this situation. But nonetheless, it's encouraging that Zivkovic will be back. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that. Let's turn our attention now to your Twitter questions. If you want to ask us a question, just hashtag Benfica Podcast, and we'll do our best to answer all of them. The first one here from Alexander Mello at Mr. underscore Mello. Thoughts on Felipe August sub at the half against Dortmund, and what do you guys make of the kids so far? Um, Probably going to stick to what we said last pod, that it was still early. Also, the last 45 minutes against Dortmund, perhaps not something that you could judge on, being that Benfica was trying to defend as much as possible, trying to cut passing lanes. But Steve, what do you think? Do you have anything else to add to what we said last week?
I don't know if I criticized him. Well, not if I had one criticism of him when I had watched him in the past for Rio Ave, looked a little lax, a little. It might be the long legs, it might be that he's got good feet. He looked like he might lack intensity. Yesterday's match kind of ruled that out for me. The intensity levels were there. He closed down the spaces that he was told to close down. I liked what I saw. Again, to take PT's spot away in a match like this one versus Braga, I do not expect it. I do not expect Felipe Augusto to start at all unless there's an injury that happens from now till then. But I do think that going forward, he is going to have a part to play. I mean, the one question I had on him was that intensity level, that willingness to do the work that was needed, and he showed me differently yesterday. So,
yeah, here's one from Rob Correa. Right now, who is the most important player on the team? And I think that Steve and I might have two different answers. I think that Pizzi is pretty important. Not Pizzi. I know that Steve's probably going to say Pizzi. I'm going to go ahead and say Jonas, even though that we've gone through most of the season without Jonas, but I think he's an integral part of this team. Who do you think, Steve?
see, it's difficult. Face is the most important
Yeah,
part.
you got Face also.
Face
Yep.
is in Portugal. It's rare that you're really going to see Fesa do a lot of work unless we're not playing well. But he's huge, and the fact that we don't really have a very good replacement for him makes him even more huge, if you ask me. I'll go with Fesa. That's
Yeah, Face is huge, and again, we don't know if Felipe Augusto could play that role, so
he
we don't
can.
know.
He
But
can, but it's in a different way than Fesa would
as
play.
of right now, because of how well he has been playing, and because if you take him out and put somebody's in there, is a huge abyss of quality difference or playing
Yeah,
difference. You would have to go with Fesa, because it's the one guy that we take. If we take out, there's a noticeable difference in the way that the team plays. Daniel Infant wanted to know if we agree that if Rui Vitoria has hardly ever got the name tag tactician, but his changes at halftime tonight saved Benfica,
yep.
and he deserves credit. Do we agree with that? I think that that we pretty much do.
I absolutely agree. And you know what? Rui Vitória does normally gets his substitutions right. I always give him a hard time for not being a great tactician, but he normally does choose the right substitute for what the game is presented to him. And he's not scared to make them early either, which I do like.
Yeah, he is. He has at times he has read the games very, very well, and as Steve mentioned, has inserted the guy that was needed according to his read. Here's one from Kevin, not our Kevin, but the Portista
Not,
Kevin.
Oh,
Is the 1-0 enough to help you get past Dortmund as much as a hard time as you had at home versus Dortmund? I think that it's enough
we have
as
to
long as
score.
Benfica can get a goal. Not only that, but also finds a way to get past that counter press that we had mentioned earlier. What else do we got here? He also asks, with a tough game coming up against Braga, you think fatigue will set in and be a factor? I don't think so. I mean, from Tuesday to Sunday, that's a huge gap in there, and with today's training methods, I very much doubt that there'll be a level of fatigue, or even if fatigue will be a factor. So I don't think so. Um, let's see what else we got here. Uh, all right,
There's
here we
lots
go.
of them, man.
Here's one from Alex Mello again. Will Benfica address the midfield in the offseason? And if so, how? Seems to be a weakness this season. I don't know, man. We thought they were gonna address
You know,
Renato's leaving.
the last time we addressed the midfield situation, we bought Samaris. Um, we'll have to. It's very difficult to say. I mean, the one thing with that position is you normally need a pretty mature player unless you get lucky. Uh,
Yeah,
and if you don't get lucky, you're buying a 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old player that if he's going to go right into your lineup, he's going to have a price tag. So it makes it difficult for that position. I would like to think that we will see Pedro Rodriguez make his way into the lineup or make his way into the roster next year and add a different type of player to the mix. But I don't think he's going to be the answer to the question either. So it's early days to be talking about summer
yeah,
transfers and whatnot.
yeah. And I
The,
think,
the
yeah, I
number eight
think that
position has
Rob,
been the number eight position has been a bit of a question mark for a long time now. Long time.
since Enzo left,
Yep.
and even Enzo was an
Even Enzo
adapted
was
player.
exactly since Witzel left. If you want to
Yeah.
go that far.
So we don't. I mean, there's still a lot of speculation. I think that Rob Correa asked the same thing about what if 2, 3 players leave next season. Who should we go get? It's still super early, man. We don't know for sure. Francisco Marcelino, do you guys agree that Pizzi always fails to have an impact in big matches? If so, you see any reasons for that?
Um, I have a very hard time singling out any one player. I know I'm a Pizzi fan, but I'm not going to single out any one player when the team has always struggled to
Yeah,
perform in big matches. You're not going to single out one guy. Um, Pizzi's the level that he is. I mean, you guys, I
yeah,
say it every week. He's a great player for the Portuguese league. He's probably one of the more intelligent players that we have on our team. But his brain is better than his feet are. So
yeah,
you're going to see that on occasion,
yeah,
and the occasions are always going to be more obvious when you're playing against better opposition. But you could say that about all 22 players on our roster.
yeah. And as Steve mentioned, I think I had this conversation with Cristiano. Cristiano mentioned that the Pizzi não tinha pedalada for Dortmund, and that's exactly right. I mean, his brain does function faster than his feet. I've called him here the Stephen Hawkins of Benfica. But he was caught in possession a few times yesterday against Dortmund because he wasn't quick enough to get rid of the ball. So yes, when it comes to big games and there's pressure on him, he has a little bit harder time. If he has rooms, he could kill teams with his skill set, and especially with his football smarts, his football brain. He could kill a team with that. But as when you get pressure on him and tight pressure, he struggles. He struggles. Um, Also, Francisco Marcelino, Eliseu is performing very nicely. Should Rui Vitória keep him in the 11 instead of Almeida in the league matches?
I'm pretty sure he will. He had an okay game against uh, Dortmund, I guess, but against Aroca, in the first 20 minutes he loses the ball more often than anybody else on the pitch. So it is what it is, man. A lot of people really like Eliseu. I am not a fan, um, but
Yeah,
he's good enough, man. We won the league with him as a left back. We could win a
yeah.
league with him at left back again.
I'd rather have Eliseo than have a wrong-footed Almeida, to be honest with you.
I I could see where you're going with that, but I find Eliseu wastes the ball with his wrong foot just as often as Almeida does with his right foot. So
You,
you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
you get Eliseu and there's a very simple pass to be made and the play would progress, but he decides he wants to cross the ball from 30 yards and try to find Mitroglou. But why?
yeah.
It's I don't know. It's up to me.
Hey,
It's up to preference. Neither of them are world beaters. I'd prefer Almeida.
yeah, Steve, a little bit of trivia for you. Do you know the only player to have been present in Louis-Zon's first game and Louis-Zon's 500th game?
Only player to have been present in Louis-Zon's first game and
Having
500th game.
played in both
Okay,
the first game and 500th game. Não sabes?
actually played in both
Yeah.
games.
Yep.
It's got to be someone old. Julio Cesar. My
Eliseu.
guess. Eliseu, he played against Belenenses' first match?
That's right.
No way.
Yep.
That's some trivia. I want to see that. Somebody give me the game sheet from his first match.
There's a Twitter picture actually that shows Luizão, João Pereira, and Eliseu.
Really?
And that was Luizão's picture.
Eliseu is playing for Belenenses, though.
Eliseu is playing for Belenenses. That's correct.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a picture. If somebody sees that picture, please tweet that out at Steve. Mr. Mello is asking, does Capitão get a statue outside of Luge? 500 matches in a Benfica jersey. No,
there's only room for one.
There's a lot more guys, dude. I know that there's a not a Fesa, a Ferrer statue. When you go in to take the tour, if I'm not mistaken, one of those entrances, and there's one of also the Hungarian coach, which name I will refuse to say here. But I don't. I mean, it's possible. It's possible that at one point Benfica will develop something kind of like what the NFL has as the Hall of Fame, which is the busts of a player. And they will just induct guys into the museum. I think the museum is a perfect space for that type of honoring, if you will.
Yeah, but outside the stadium, there's only room for one. I think that's what the question was, and there's only room for that one Eusebi one. I would be very disappointed if we tried to add anybody else within the near future, unless something really drastic or really extravagant and amazing happens within the next 30 years. In my lifetime, I wouldn't like to see anybody else get a statue outside.
Yeah, that statue is special, man, and there's been a lot of guys throughout Benfica history that would probably deserve a statue more than Luizão. I mean, Shell is a legend, but there's Aguas.
But Shell's been with the club for 40 freaking years, man. Come on.
There's Aguas who's been immortalized in that picture of him lifting the Champions League, the Champions Cup, the European Champions Cup at that time. The club won. I mean, that man's been immortalized. There's other guys that have been.
Nene. There's guys. No,
there's tons of guys.
I can see it in the museum, like you say.
Yeah, Francisco Merslin. If Jonas is not available for the league match, who should replace him in the 11 to pair up with Mitro?
Rafa.
Yeah, either Rafa or Servi, but the way it's been going, it looks like Rafa. Is Ederson the best since Prudhomme? Francisco Merslin wants to know.
It's very difficult. I think Ederson, Oblak, Prudhomme are probably the three best keepers we've had in Benfica colors within the past 20, 25 years.
What about Roberto, Steve?
Come on.
What about what?
Roberto's best game at the Luge was playing for someone else.
Yeah. What about Muretu?
I barely remember him. I know who you're talking about.
What about Bossiu?
I
I could go on and on,
that
dude.
that one's right over my head. I do not remember him at all.
Francisco Marcelino with the questions. Is Jonas the best striker since Isaías?
Yeah, but Jonas is for me
I think
probably
even
one of the best players we've had since João Vieira Pinto. If
yeah.
not, that's
I'm,
the level he's
I
at.
mean, if you're talking about strikers, I think that for me, even Cardozo was better than Isaías. I mean, I saw Isaías play and he was a beast, but striker, lethal type of guys, number nines, I think that you got to add Cardozo to that conversation. Of course, Jonas is not a nine type of guy, so
He just scores a
maybe,
lot like a 9, which is
yeah,
what's awesome
maybe
about him.
that's not the comparison that we want to be making. Mario, based on the current standings of the second division, there is a chance Benfica will be the only big three with the B team. Any thoughts? Yes, Steve. So I read this that Sporting is considering just getting just ceasing the B team if the team gets relegated to the third division. I didn't hear anything about Porto, but and I don't
we
know where they are on the table.
it's early days still. We were almost out last year or the year before that too. So I'm not going to comment on that and what might happen to them when we were in the same shoes not too long ago. I think Sporting would be making a mistake if they do that, and that's
Yeah.
all I gotta say.
Yeah, well, I mean, what are you gonna do with all the kids you're forming? I mean, somebody tweeted at me, and I apologize for not remembering your name. That in the B team this past weekend they had I want to say 6 or 7 players on the B team that were first year juniors for Benfica.
Okay, us, yeah. That's been a common occurrence, I believe, this year.
Yeah. Francisco Marcelino wants to know if we need to sell only one, which one would you sell? Ederson, Lindelof, or Grimaldo?
If you could only sell, if you could sell only one, and
If you could only sell one, which one of these three would you be okay in selling? Ederson, Lindelof, or
that's
Grimaldo?
that's really tough. I have a very soft spot for Grimaldo, as you guys know, but he's done very little. I mean, we haven't even been able to see what he could do. I don't know. I'll pick a name out of the hat at this point.
Yeah.
I think Ederson is probably the best of the three for his position. So he's the one you'd want to keep the most. The other two, let's sell Grimaldo because he's been injury prone, even in
Yeah.
his early years at Barca as well. So.
Yeah, I would go with Lindelof. I think that for all the years that we've struggled without a left back, just seeing Grimaldo and to be able to keep him for another season, albeit maybe just a half a season because he's going to be injured for the rest of the season. I think it's a breath of fresh air to have a guy. Again, Herpes has been working out with the team. He has yet to sniff any playing time or even the bench.
Even
I don't think he's made the bench once.
I don't think he's made the roster yet. Yeah, like you say. So it's
So we don't know.
It's difficult to pull those guys out of Brazil, and unless you're buying a Gabriel Jesus or something like that, you don't know what you're going to get by the time they come over and start playing in Europe. So
yeah. Also, a question connected to Grimaldo. Based on how Eliseu has been playing lately, when Grimaldo comes back next month, will he be first choice left back? And that comes from Eliseu, the man. What do you think, Steve?
Grimaldo will have to show that he's fit.
Yeah.
If he's fit and is playing at the level that he was before he got injured, Eliseu doesn't stand a chance. I'm sorry to tell you.
Yeah, I think that the type of procedure that he had, the type of surgery that he had against which was on the abdominal wall, if I'm not mistaken. I believe I am correct when I say that. It's something that will take a little bit to recuperate. And I'm pretty sure that, I'm not sure, that Benfica lab is working on that. But, I mean, like Steve said, just like last year, he had to show that he was ready to play. So it might be a little bit before Grimaldo shows up again. But then again, Eliseo is getting long in the tooth. He's more injury prone. But then we also got Almeida. So
It's all down to physical fitness and form. Grimaldo's not going to walk back into the team. I don't think he's not Jonas, but who knows?
yeah, for sure. Let's see what else we got here. We got a lot of questions here. Uh, I think that's it. There was a lot of questions, but just people going back and forth with Benter. So that's pretty much it. We will be back next week. That's all I got. Did you want to add anything else to it?
Not that I could think of. I think the Braga game is going to be a good match, not only in terms of the stature of first against fourth against what's been in the past. I think it's going to be a very attack versus defense match. I'm pretty sure George Simão is going to not park the bus, but he's not going to take many chances, and it'll end up being a good match to watch. It's going to be the all powerful Benfica attack versus a very stout Braga defense. So
Yeah.
let's see.
A team with a lot of doubts, where players are kind of doubting what they could do after George Simon took over, for sure. One last one, one last one, oh, one last one, one
Juan,
last one
Juan.
from Eliseo Demand. Luison's performance against Dortmund. Where would you rank that in his career? One of his best games in months, for sure. One of his best games in months. I mean, it's times like these where the team needs a leader, and the team needs somebody to push forward and lead by example. Where Luison comes out and really leads the troops. I think that when we mention here, and oftentimes been said that Luison's old, he should be replaced. We should have a different back line. And look, something that you can't replace is leadership skills, and the fact that this player has been with the club for this long and has this much influence and this much respect from the players around him and also from his peers. You can't replace that, no matter how much you try. And I think that Luison is that sort of a player. Luison, on the eve of, or as he was getting ready to play his 500th game, he knew that the game was as important for the club as it was for him to hit this milestone. And I think that he embraced the importance of the games, not only for himself, but also for the club, because he knew it was something that needed to be done in regards to the game against Dortmund. So I think that he thought about the club first and then himself second. So he went out and he took advantage, and he took in the toast from the fans, and the fact that the club wanted to give him tribute for his 500th game. And look, nobody wants to have a tribute game and have a howler of a game. Give up a couple goals, make a couple mistakes that are going to lead to goals. So, I mean, he's not a guy that feels the pressure, but he certainly stepped up to the occasion.
Absolutely, and that's really what you need to say. He raised to the occasion. He stepped up to the occasion. It was his 500th match against a very difficult team, and he played. You know what? The whole back line had a very good game. Even Lindelof, who's been shaky on and off, had a very good game. There was very harsh criticism to face. I don't think that was warranted, if you ask me. But
No, I mean, I think the criticism to face is the fact that he was outmanned. I think the criticism to Carrillo is the fact that, as Steve's mentioned, if we can't get that outlet ball to Carrillo or to one of the wingers, he's going to be isolated. He's going to be taken out of the game because the passing lanes are not there. So I think I don't think it's fair to criticize those guys because they underperformed. I just think that, as I mentioned, Dortmund allowed us to play what they wanted. And I think that's how you pretty much resumed that game.
absolutely.
So next week we'll be back. We'll recap Braga and we'll look ahead to Benfica's next game. We'll be back to our regularly scheduled program on Tuesday. You've been listening to the Benfica podcast. Thanks for checking us out. Don't forget our friends over at planetbenfica.co.uk, at SteveCento6, at 10CO10 is where you can find Steve and Cristiano respectively. BenficaPodcast.com, at Benfica Podcast is where you can find the podcast Twitter feed or timeline. And that's pretty much it. We're on Facebook. Check us out. Give us a like. Leave a comment. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes. Also, that helps find a new audience for the podcast. Thank you very much, everybody. Everybody have a good week, and Forza Benfica. Steve, nice to have you here all the time.
You too, man. Nice to be around.
All right. Talk to you guys. See ya.
Later.